Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're going to be having a look at one particular Penguin book, and that is John Hersey's Hiroshima. Now this book, if you've never read it, well, I certainly recommend you do that, but how Penguin got it to print is almost as exciting as an adventure story. It's fantastic, and the immediacy of how Alan Lane himself wanted to get this book into print is just Penguin all over from that sort of period in their history. And I think it makes a really interesting story. So that is what we're going to have a look at today. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay, so the Hiroshima story is recounted in this great book here. Now, this is the Alan Lane and the Penguin Editors, 1935 to 1970, and this was published in 1995 for Penguin's 60th anniversary. And there's a whole section here on Hiroshima, page 169, and what I've done, because this book is out of print nowadays, I have basically read this out, so we'll go through this. Basically it recounts the story literally by telegram to letter to telegram right up to the publication, and it is absolutely fascinating. But before that actually starts, I thought you might want to have a look at the finished product. So here is the first Penguin edition of Hiroshima, and I've ended up getting 3 copies because every time I see a copy I can't help but pick it up, and because the first print run was 250,000, it's hardly scarce, so you should be able to pick up a copy without too much trouble. It's in the grey jacket, which is like World Affairs, so these were post-war sort of war-related subjects which weren't part of the Penguin Special series. Priced at £1. There is John Hersey on the back, a little bit about him, born in 1914, son of a YMCA worker, engaged on famine relief. A great author. He wrote some fiction as well as non-fiction, and Penguin published 250,000 copies of this one. August, so it's got the printing history there. First published in the New Yorker, August 1946. Penguin eventually got it published on the 10th of November 1946, so a little bit later. And there is a publisher's note here, which I do read a little bit later on, where Penguin mentioned about how they got it printed out in the edition of 250,000 copies. And all of Hershey's profits from this were donated to the American Red Cross, which is fantastic. There's a little introduction from the New Yorker. Very, very good. And you can, because this is only just over 119 pages, you can literally sit down and read this in one sitting, and it is very, very worthwhile doing such a thing. I do recommend it. Now, I always pick up extra copies because it's a sort of book I actually give to people and say, you must, if you've never read it, you really, really should give Hiroshima a go. So that's why I've got these copies of it. Now, around the same time, Bantam in America did their own version of it. Obviously, this has got a pictorial cover. This is actually quite scarce, but I was lucky to come across a copy, so I grabbed it. And let's see when this one was dated. This was March 1948, before the Bantam edition was published. That is because, and we'll hear about this in a minute, Alfred Knopf had the trade paperback, the trade hardback rather, of this. So they wanted to print that one first, before, which is what's pictured on the back, before they printed their sort of mass market paperback adaptation. So that's the American one. Now, the book was an unrivaled classic almost upon publication, and then Penguin themselves revived the Penguin specials, and Hiroshima did end up as a Penguin special. And it says it was reprinted as a companion volume to the new Penguin special, The Voyage of the Lucky Dragon, which tells what happened to 23 fishermen when an H-bomb exploded at Bikini in 1954. So it was a bit of a later incident. So Penguin took the opportunity to reprint Hiroshima at that time as a Penguin special. So it does say, first published in the New Yorker, then published in Penguin, and then reprinted 1958. So this is 12 years later. So there's that edition of it. And then it also came out as a Penguin Modern Classic with the familiar sort of grey spine. Now, I don't have many books in my collection which are ISBN, basically post 1970, but Hiroshima I make an exception to because it's such a great read, you know. This is a Germano Fassetti designed cover. It shows details of Victims of Hiroshima by Kando Shusi in the Museum of Hiroshima. And there we are. That's what was used for the cover. And this particular Penguin Modern Classics edition was first published in 1972. It's got the same sort of publisher's note from earlier on. I was just looking to see. Yeah, it just gives a more up-to-date biography of John Hersey there. Now, there was just one other thing which was published, and this was on the sort of same subject, which was a pelican. Now, this is a Pelican A599, and it's Children of the Ashes, and it's The People of Hiroshima by Robert Junk. And this particular pelican was published in 1963. As you can see here, quite unusual. There was obviously an issue with his biography and it was pasted over. Rather than reprint the entire book, they just put a paste inside. Obviously there was some sort of error. It's been done before on pelicans, in fact. Patrick Moore had one. And what's this in here? This is a little tipped-in map of Hiroshima. I guess you can sort of see where things have been, where the bomb actually dropped. So anyway, that's all my sort of Hiroshima Penguin-related books, and that is quite a nice one. That one, once again, in a lot more detail than Hiroshima itself, but certainly worth having. So there you go. So what we'll do now, I shall read you from Penguin Portrait, basically the story of how Penguin themselves managed to get such an important book from magazine to print, something to book form, something that would have ordinarily have taken months, if not years, at that particular point, just after the war. But how Alan Lane was able to get the whole process sped up, and basically was published within 4 or 5 months later. The following note appeared in the New Yorker of the 31st of August 1946 as an introduction to John Hersey's article. The New Yorker this week devotes its entire editorial space to an article on the utmost complete obliteration of a city by one atomic bomb and what happened to the people of that city. It does so in the conviction that few of us have yet comprehended the all but incredible destructive power of this weapon, and that everyone might well take time to consider the terrible implications of its use. Next is a letter from Victor Waybright, Penguin Books Inc., New York, to Alan Lane on the 29th of August 1946. I am sending you herewith the most impressive piece of journalism in all of my experience and acquaintance with periodicals in America. A total issue of the New Yorker, just out, devoted to Hiroshima by John Hersey. Immediately upon seeing it and reading it, I got in touch with Lesser of Nantes, not only on their behalf, but on behalf of Penguin Books Limited. Obviously, I could not speak for you or commit to you, but I knew I was on safe ground in assuming that you might be interested in this as an immediate Penguin special for England. Gollancz did Hersey's last book, but I don't think Gollancz has a firm claim on this. Lesser is going to take up with Alfred Knopf tomorrow the question of whether an agreement might be possible with Penguin Books Limited, skipping a trade edition altogether, or perhaps a trade edition and a Penguin Books Limited edition simultaneously. All this, of course, is contingent upon your being interested in making a bid for it. I would appreciate it if you could write or cable me your views as soon as you have studied this extraordinary issue of the New Yorker. Next was a telegram from Dick Lane, who was running the business while Alan Lane was away in Switzerland. Frosty and I not enthusiastic. Hersey New Yorker article for this side. Stop. Alan in Switzerland will cable on his return if he is more impressed. Dick. Next was a cable from Victor Waybright to Alan Lane, 6th of September 1946. Believe Hiroshima rights might be available if firm offer were made to Knopf, who are rushing out book 4, November 1st publication, this country, before actual Hersey contract is finally signed. Stop. Apparently, Gollancz is priority British publication, but no formal contract yet exists. Victor Waybright. Then, in a letter from Victor Waybright to Richard Lane, 6th of September 1946, I was disappointed to hear that you and Frosty are not enthusiastic about the Hiroshima article by John Hersey, which occupied the entire editorial content of last week's New Yorker. I read it on the Wednesday evening when my subscription copy arrived, and the first thing Thursday morning attempted to get it for Penguin Books Limited. The whole issue of the New Yorker was sold out by 9 o'clock, and the New Yorker office was flooded with requests to reprint it. Knopf was equally beset by book propositions, and it looks as if it will be a Book of the Month club selection here. Meanwhile, hundreds of newspapers throughout the country are reprinting it in serial form, including the Herald Tribune here in New York. If there is any hesitation at Penguin Books Limited, I imagine the best thing to do would be to let it go to Gollancz. If Alan is more impressed than you or Frosty, please let me know. Although everything is moving so rapidly that I don't imagine Knopf can wait longer for evidence of interest. That was Victor Waybright to Richard Lane. Then next is a telegram from Alan Lane to Victor Waybright, 9th of September 1946. Just returned from continent. Our rights here at Hiroshima articles still free. Cable reply. Alan Lane. And the same day, intensely anxious, secure New Yorker Hiroshima article. Sincerely hope you can yet arrange for us to publish here. Then Alan Lane writes to Victor Waybright, I very much hope that we have not missed the John Hersey Hiroshima book. I was in Switzerland on business all last week, the results of which I hope to be able to give you in the very near future, and I think may conceivably interest you. And while there saw a note in the New York Herald Tribune, Paris edition, of the New Yorker number devoted to this article, which incidentally the Herald Tribune are running serially commencing yesterday. On my return, I was about to cable you for information when Dick told me that he had already more or less turned it down. I read it in bed last night, and this morning Glover also read it. We are both intensely enthusiastic, and I think it should be published by us without delay. I am keeping my fingers crossed that someone has not already snapped it up. In any case, I am grateful to you for your promptitude with which you acted. Then cable from Victor Waybright back to Alan Lane on the 10th of September. New Yorker urging Hersey, who is absent from City, to recommend Penguin for Hiroshima in England. Stop. Meanwhile, believe an offer from you would interest Knopf, who assume their contract will include right to place book in England. Then a telegram from Alan Lane to Victor Waybright, 10th of September. Have just spoken to Gollancz, who have wired New York expressing interest in Hiroshima. Stop. Will you contact Knopf and make firm offer our behalf of $1,000. Stop. If higher advance required, please cable or telephone reverse charges personal. Alan. Victor Waybright to Alan Lane on the 11th of September. Sorry to miss you personally, but have confirmed Hiroshima with Knopf for you to have first book publication in England. 250,000 publication. Date first week in November. Stop. I am delighted. Victor Waybright. Then A letter from Victor Waybright to Frosty, that's Eunice Frost, on the 11th of September. It was a joy to hear your rippling English voice and to note, if I am not mistaken, that Alan had infected you with my own enthusiasm for Hiroshima. I only regret I missed a direct connection with him because it's been so long since we have been in touch. You will never regret doing Hiroshima, which is certainly destined to become a classic of its time. There were wheels within wheels in the effort to secure it for Penguin Books Limited, and money wasn't the prime mover, but the auspices of the Penguin imprint and the Penguin audience were. Both Howell Ross and True recommended the Penguin deal to Hersey, and Hersey in turn was responsible for upping the guarantee to a guarantee of 250,000 copies, even though the $2,000 with which he will have to split with Knopf is peanuts compared with the guarantee he might have expected on a trade edition. It is necessary, of course, to permit Glantz to bring out an expensive edition after your publication, making him wait a decent interval, I hope. I will keep sending Alan promotional material of possible use in dramatising your edition. I will be most interested in a report on all your editorial reactions to it, including Billy's. I had a curious hunch that Alan would see it as I did, with his flair for the timely that transcends mere journalism. On the 12th now, the very next day, Alan Lane to Victor Waybright. I am frantically excited about the Hiroshima book, and am enclosing herewith our contract, which I would be glad if you would let Knopf have, and if, as I hope it is in order, I shall be glad if you will get one copy from him for return to us. I would like to also take the opportunity of thanking the Knopfs personally for letting us have the book. It seems after all that perhaps your lunch in Claridge's was not in vain. What thrills me even more is this instance of cooperation from your side. It will, I hope, prove to be the forerunner of many such plans, and it demonstrates how usefully we can run in double harness. Dick has just gone off to Denmark for a long weekend. I am afraid he does not share all my enthusiasm for the Hersey book, nor in fact does Frosty, as you all by now have gathered. But although I can see reason why it might not be liked here, I am sure that we have made a right judgment. We are now announcing our first 3 post-war specials, namely Hiroshima, the Nuremberg Trials, and the Anatomy of Peace. That was Alan Lane to Victor Waybright on the 12th of September, 1946. This is Alan Lane to Blanche Knopf, 24th of September, 1946. I am writing this personal note of appreciation of your helpfulness in steering the John Hersey Hiroshima book in our direction. At the time when we first had news of this exciting project, I was in Switzerland on a short business trip, which accounted for the slight delay there was in our making up our minds. But the speed at which the final decision was arrived at impressed me considerably, and we are now fully engaged in meeting the contractual publication date of November the 1st. As you know, our first printing is 250,000 copies. Final page proofs were passed today, and despite the current threat of a printer's strike, we hope to get the first copies in the house within the next 2 weeks. After the public acclaim with which the account has been received, it would be superfluous for me to write in its praise, but I would like you to know that I feel its publication here may do a great deal towards a future peace. Victor Waybright to Alan Lane on the 26th of September. I have just gone over the Hiroshima contracts with Messrs. Lesser and Koshland and initialed several changes. 2 of them are important. 1. The published price is held to £1 at £2 per thousand royalty. 2. The advance guarantee payable upon publication of the first edition of 250,000 copies is $2,000. This was the understanding that Knopf had on the day we struck the bargain after my telephone call to England. If for any reason the payment on publication seems too steep, let me know and I can have Penguin Books Incorporated assist in part. It is actually of considerable value to us, as well as to Penguin Books Limited, to have been involved so intimately with everyone concerned in this Hersey tour de force. This is Richard Lane to Victor Waybright, 26th of September 1946. I feel I ought to write to you regarding my first reactions to the Hiroshima book. As you know, my main job in the firm is not editorial, and I only coped with this during Alan's absence. My job, however, apart from finance, is to see that when we have paid advances on books that these are not shelved, and at the present time, while we are still rationed for paper, to see as far as possible that a book, having once been signed up, flows to its final publication without too many hindrances. Naturally, one of the biggest hindrances is the production of rush and special books, which upsets the routine. As we still ration booksellers, the question of whether a book is a potential bestseller or not hardly comes into the picture. We have quite a number of books signed up and advances paid well over 10 years ago. We also have the case of a book on which we have publication rights for 5 years only from the January the 1st, 1945, which has not yet been set. Every time we do a special, it naturally hinders the production of these books. I read Hiroshima right through during my critical hours, commencing 5 a.m. I thought it was an able piece of work and I thought it would sell, but more important to me was the fact that it would hinder the publication of books already in hand. As you know, there is a terrific bottleneck in binding at the moment, and an extra 250,000 copies do make a difference. I can quite see Alan's point of view. It is something new and exciting. It involved cables and transatlantic phone calls, which he loves, and also there is the question that if we got the book, a certain other publisher would not. I thought I would like to explain this to you so that you would not think my lack of enthusiasm was entirely due to the book itself. This is Alan Lane to Victor Waybright on the 11th of October. Once again, 1,000 thanks for the way in which you handled and are handling this most significant publication. The contract as sent with your letter of October the 1st is okay with me. I have had it stamped and put in the archives. Although we could publish in a limited way by, say, November the 5th, there are 2 printers who are working on it cannot give us a better delivery than 5,000 to 6,000 copies a day, and we are therefore holding up the publication until we can make a really good distribution. The date we have fixed as being, for a number of reasons, the most apt is November the 10th. This, you will note, is a Sunday, so that the books will only be on sale on the Monday, but it is a day fixed as a commemoration for all those who were killed or died during the Great War I and the Great War II. The King is unveiling a new inscription on the cenotaph on that morning, and the 2-minute silence which has hitherto been observed on the 11th is being transferred 1 day earlier. I am not anticipating any trouble with the exchange control, but if we do run into snags, I will certainly call on you for help. The BBC, a fortnight ago, started what they called the third programme, i.e. an addition to the normal Home and Light programmes, a feature which has been an outstanding success, and they are serialising Hiroshima in, I think, 3 instalments in the programme this week. I am glad that Blanche Knopf is pleased with us, and I hope that this may lead to further cooperation in the future. This final piece is an extract from the publisher's note, which is included in the first Penguin edition. The New Yorker's original intention was to make the story a serial, but in an inspired moment the paper's editors saw that it must be published as a single whole and decided to devote a whole issue to Hersey's masterpiece of reconstruction. For 10 days Hersey feverishly rewrote and polished the story, handing it out by instalments to the printers, and no hint of what was in the air escaped from the New Yorker's office. On August 31st, in the paper's usual format, the historic issue appeared. It created a first-order sensation in American journalistic history. A few hours after publication, the issue was sold out. Applications poured in for permissions to serialize the story in other American journals, among them the New York Herald Tribune, Washington Post, the Chicago Sun, and Boston Globe. A condensed version, the cuts personally approved by Hersey, was broadcast in 4 installments by the American Broadcasting Company. Some 50 newspapers in the US eventually obtained permission to use the story in serial form. The copyright fees, after tax deduction, at Hersey's direction, go into the American Red Cross. Albert Einstein ordered 1,000 copies of the New Yorker containing the story. Even stage rights were sought from the author, though he refused to give permission for dramatization. British newspapers and press syndicates immediately cabled for reproduction rights, but the New Yorker's executives insisted that no cutting could be permitted, and with British paper rationing, full newspaper publication seemed to be impracticable. The book production rights for the United States were secured by Alfred A. Knopf Incorporated, and the American Book of the Month Club chose it for its publication as an extra, and the BBC obtained permission to broadcast the article in 4 episodes as part of their new third programme. Penguin Books, feeling that Hersey's story should receive the widest possible circulation in Great Britain, immediately cabled to Alfred A. Knopf for, and were accorded, permission to issue it complete in book form. It here appears, save for following English spelling conventions, in an edition of 250,000 copies, exactly as it appeared in the pages of the New Yorker. Many accounts have been published telling, so far as security considerations allow, how the atom bomb works, but here, for the first time, is not a description of scientific triumphs, of intricate machines, new elements and mathematical formulas, but an account of what the bomb does, seen through the eyes of some of those to whom it did it, of those who endured one of the world's most catastrophic experiences and lived. Extract from the publisher's note included in the Penguin edition. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this look at how Penguin brought Hiroshima to print. It certainly is a fascinating story. If you have enjoyed today's video, do please give it a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing for regular vintage Penguin books content. There's loads already on the channel, and there's lots more planned for the future. And I shall look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.